Well, kia ora everyone. It's wonderful to be here. No, truly. Slightly different capacity than previously, but very, very similar. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to speak in front of you for a few minutes this afternoon. Can I acknowledge Stephen and the team at Infrastructure New Zealand. Look, it's been another quiet couple of weeks in politics. I found time to clean out my office. It's amazing what you find in there, actually. Amongst the things I did find in my little trip down memory lane was the 2008 election policy for ultra-fast fibre to the home of the National Party then in opposition. And actually, if I look back at it now, it was quite a slim document. And I remember actually helping to put it together, largely because I was the campaign chair at the time for the then leader of the opposition, John Key. And we were like, this thing isn't ready for prime time. So we rang a few mates in the telecommunications industry and fleshed it out a little to make sure it was ready. And in that process, I remember standing on my front porch at home at one point, arguing with somebody who was a software analyst and telecommunications network guy who may or may not have been my brother about how this would all work together. Anyway, we won that election, and after that, John said, well, you seem to know a bit about it. You can do communications and transport. And I hope you'll forgive me just a brief trip down memory lane today. It's just the frame of mind I'm in for a few minutes, and then we'll talk about the forward thing. But it has been an absolute privilege over the last 9 years to, in many ways, have the opportunity to lead a lot of the government infrastructure investment for various reasons. Starting the roads of national significance, which have now progressed, I think, to a point where actually everybody is united. Well, not quite everybody, but most people united in seeing those through to completion. And many of them delivering the sort of transformational network opportunities that we all knew they were capable of doing. And I think of the Waikato Expressway, Tauranga Eastern Link, the Waterview Tunnel as part of the Western Ring Route in Auckland. And it's amazing how many people were cynical about that tunnel right up until she opened. And now they can't speak highly enough of it. And that's been absolute pleasure. But of course, not just the broadband, it's the rail and so on. But in more recent times, we've spent quite a bit of time talking with Stephen and the team about how you turn this into a longer term story. And if I have one big regret at this stage of the program, is that we had not yet had that opportunity to cement that in place, and that's now the job of another team. And I hope fervently that they will pick up that ball and run with it, and not just pick out favourite projects and decide to build those irrespective of their, dare I say it with a certain Treasury hat on, benefit cost analysis. And without actually building a consensus around what needs to be done. And New Zealand's infrastructure has come a long way in the last 9 years. You actually only have to think back a little bit to think about how we used to do, for example, build motorways and expressways 2 kilometres at a time. And now we actually build them at sort of 25 or 30 or 50 kilometres at a time. We also have dedicated streams of revenue devoted to different programs, but there's more to be done, much, much more to be done. So at the risk of being a little bit cheeky, I have some recommendations for the new Minister for Infrastructure, one Shane Jones, I do believe, who I have a passing acquaintance with. And that would be to think really carefully about the processes you set up to ensure that consensus is achieved and we don't go another 3 years to 3 years to 3 years to 3 years. Because actually infrastructure is not suited to the 3-year election cycle. You know, it's always going to have it because that's politics, but it needs to be planned out. You know, one of the most conscious things I was aware of in budget 2017, that we had $32.5 billion worth of investment over the next 4 years, but the the most important thing was not, well, execution of that, incredibly important, but the most important thing was thinking about the 35 to 40 billion for the 4 years after that. And the political cycle is not conducive to that, but it needs to be. And the debate needs to be now about what's being done from 2021 to 2025. And I know many people in the room would see that as a reasonably short-term perspective. But I'm telling you, for central government, that's stretching it. So that's really important. The other thing we've got to keep thinking strongly about, and I'm going to recommend to Shane, is that no matter how much money he manages to winkle out of the new Minister of Finance, which I suspect is considerably more than it should be, but nevertheless, no matter how much he winkles out of him, it won't be enough to actually keep shifting the dial on infrastructure. You need to bring in private sector investment, not just to the government side, but really importantly, the local government side. Because I tell you what, the ratepayers are the same people as the taxpayers, and if there's one thing I can promise you is they'll get really sick of quite quickly being soaked in a number of different extra ways for more money, for more infrastructure, particularly when it doesn't need to be the case. And actually there's opportunities to bring in, and I was particularly excited about Crown Infrastructure Partnerships, and I hope they stay with that opportunity to bring forward investable opportunities out of local government sector, which has been one of the biggest challenges, is that the local government sector hasn't been quite able to get investable opportunities to market on its own. And following the broadband model with Crown Fibre Holdings, there is a real potential to do that. So there's heaps to do. And I like to think that we made a good and valuable start. Another 9, 12 years would have been useful, but there's always a danger that people get sick of your ugly mug. So now we are Her Majesty's loyal opposition. And actually, I will tell you this little story. The other day, I got a text from Bill, who sends his apologies, by the way. And he says, look, can you do this speech at the infrastructure guys for me on Thursday afternoon? He said, it's a lotto speech on the text. And I sort of went back to him and said, what's a lotto speech? I said, I haven't played lotto for a long time. He said, leader of the opposition. I said, oh, that's great. Thank you for checking me with the nomenclature. He says, and you are ossify. Now, I said, what's that? He said, opposition spokesman for finance and infrastructure. Ossify, get used to it. He says, you know, you were actually, this was your whole life was preparation for this role. So our job now is to hold the government to account. And can I give you that absolute commitment as Her Majesty's very loyal opposition, that that's what we'll be seeking to do, not just for our own sake and to work out our own frustrations and demons, although I'm sure there's a little bit of that, but primarily because actually the public of New Zealand needs that. They need that determination to ensure that the best possible decisions are made, and those that aren't made well are highlighted. Because we only have to look across the Tasman Sea to see what a pig's ear you can make of infrastructure with a thing called the National Broadband Network if you don't do it properly. And believe you me, the difference between the NBN and New Zealand's ultra-fast broadband, as the minister who was there at the time, is not as great as you would think it would be in the preparation and execution. But as you all know, it's vastly different in terms of cost, delivery, and performance. So please keep that stuff carefully in mind. I know you think it's important. I definitely think it's important. And it's going to be all of our jobs over the next 3 years to make sure that every post for New Zealand is a winning post. Thank you very much for having me here. Cheers.